On the morning of May 21st, 2007, a quiet anomaly appeared inside a naval tracking system that wasn't supposed to notice anything unusual. The network's job was simple: watch the deep, flag the obvious, ignore the noise. Lieutenant Commander Ethan Cross had stared at those green and blue readouts for so long that the screen felt like an extension of his vision. You didn't think about what you were seeing. You read it the way you read weather: patterns, probabilities, routine, until the routine broke. A faint blip pulsed at the edge of the display, not drifting with the current the way debris did, not behaving like a submarine, not matching the acoustic and thermal signatures the system was trained to recognize. It sat almost perfectly still, deep in a trench that most crews avoided because sensors tended to misbehave there. Cross zoomed in, expecting the usual correction. Some glitch, a ghost return, a software hiccup. The blip held steady. It pulsed again. Slow, controlled, like a heartbeat. He leaned forward, ran a quick cross-check, then another. The more he verified, the worse it felt. Something was there, something large, and it wanted to be noticed. "Sir," Cross called out, keeping his voice calm because calm was a habit you learned early. "I've got a persistent contact 12 miles east of St. Helena Sound, depth just under 900 feet. Rear Admiral Victor Sloan approached with the unhurried pace of a man who'd seen enough alarms to distrust most of them. He set down his coffee without taking his eyes off Cross's screen. "Foreign vessel?" Sloan asked. Cross shook his head. "No propulsion signature, no thermal trail, and it's not drifting. It's sitting right where it is, like it's anchored." Sloan studied the dot, the repeating pulse, the way it didn't behave like anything the ocean typically swallowed and forgot. "How big?" he asked. Cross adjusted the parameters. The estimate came back and his stomach tightened. "Too big to be one of ours," he said. "Too big to be anything that's supposed to be down there." For a moment there was only the soft hum of electronics and the distant creak of the ship's structure. Sloan's face didn't give away surprise, but Cross saw the change in his eyes, the shift from mild curiosity to something sharper. "Run it against every known signature," Sloan ordered. "Then run it again." Cross did, twice. The result didn't change. The contact wasn't matching anything. When Cross looked up, Sloan was already thinking 3 steps ahead. That was what made him dangerous in meetings and invaluable at sea. "Send a recon team," Sloan said. "Unmarked vessel, quiet crew. I want eyes on it, and I want this contained." Cross hesitated. "Contained, sir." Sloan's gaze didn't soften. "Nothing leaks, not to the press, not to the wrong department, not even to the right department unless they need to know." He paused, then added the line that changed the temperature in the room. "And no heroes. We're collecting information, not bodies." 2 days later, an unmarked research vessel arrived above the coordinates under the bland label of Routine Oceanographic Survey. It wasn't routine. Everyone on board could feel that in the silence between spoken commands. Captain Elena Ward stood on the bridge as the sea stretched outward, flat and unnaturally calm. The Atlantic didn't behave like this. Not here. Not in this corridor of shifting currents and sudden weather turns. "It's like the water's been ironed," someone muttered behind her. Ward didn't respond. She watched the surface, watched the way the wind touched it, and yet didn't roughen it the way it should. Below deck, sonar specialist Jonah Reyes was already frowning at his instruments. "Captain," he called up, "you need to see this." Ward stepped into the sonar bay and felt the subtle wrongness immediately. Every screen was clean, every feed was stable, no flutter, no interference, no inexplicable error messages that technicians had come to accept as normal in this area. Reyes tapped a readout with the back of his knuckle like he didn't trust it. "This zone usually eats our equipment," he said. Compasses drift, sonar bends, cameras flicker like they're underwater and inside a microwave at the same time. But right now, everything is running at full efficiency. Ward narrowed her eyes. Why? Reyes shook his head. That's what I'm trying to figure out, but I can tell you something else. He pointed to the downward sweep, to the edge of the trench. The contact is real, he said, and it's not a wreck. Ward stared at the monitor and felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. Deploy the drone, she said. They had brought their best. A prototype deep-sea drone with reinforced housing, high-definition optics, and a sensor suite designed to survive depths that crushed older models like soda cans. It was also loaded with redundancies for this region specifically, systems meant to counter the electromagnetic weirdness that had made the trench infamous. The drone slipped into the water and began its slow descent. At 200 feet, the light outside the camera dimmed into a deep blue. At 400, it thinned into darkness. By 600, the only visible world was the cone of the drone's lamps. Reyes read off depth like he was keeping a heartbeat alive. 700, he said. 750, 800. The feed flickered once. Ward's breath caught. Then it stabilized again, clearer than before, as if something had adjusted the signal for them. 900, Reyes announced. The lamps swept across the seabed and illuminated a shape so clean and geometric that Ward's mind rejected it for a split second. The ocean floor wasn't supposed to have straight lines. It didn't make triangles. It made chaos, rocks, ridges, sediment, broken things. This wasn't chaos. A massive triangular structure rested in the trench, large enough to swallow a ship whole. Its surface was partially covered in marine growth, but the growth didn't sprawl randomly the way it did on wreckage. It followed patterns, bands, and arcs, like someone had planted it there with intention. And beneath the growth, metal gleamed, not corroded steel, not the dull gray of sunken hulls. It caught the drone's light and reflected it like polished stone. Reyes whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Ward didn't take her eyes off the screen. "That's not ours," she said quietly, as if speaking too loudly might wake it. On another monitor, an engineer zoomed in. The hull wasn't riveted, no weld lines, no identifiable seams. It looked grown in a way that made Ward's skin crawl. The drone circled. More details emerged. Along the structure's sides were perfectly circular openings, dozens of them, each identical in diameter, arranged in sequences that made no sense to a mind expecting randomness. They weren't portholes, they weren't damage. They were part of the design. Ward felt her crew's attention tighten, every person in the room leaning closer, as if proximity to the screen could change what they were seeing. "How old?" someone asked. Monroe wasn't there yet. No one had an expert answer, but Ward knew this much. If it had been dropped recently, someone would have noticed. If it had been built by any human nation, there would be trails, logistics, secrets that left fingerprints. This had none. Ward forced her voice to stay steady. "Get Sloan on the line," she said, "and make sure this feed is locked down. Nothing records outside our secured system." Within 24 hours, the ocean above the trench became a floating fortress. Warships arrived under coordinated cover. Surveillance planes circled high overhead. A central command platform was assembled, bristling with antennas and guarded like a vault. The world saw none of it. A mineral exploration cover story was quietly prepared, a set of polite lies that would satisfy bored reporters and casual observers. Inside the real operation, a new file was created, designation Atlas, and then the scientists arrived. Dr. Elias Monroe came first, his face sun-worn and sharp, eyes that had spent decades staring at ruins and wrecks and refusing to be impressed by exaggeration. He watched the footage once without speaking, then watched it again, slower. "Never seen anything like it," he said finally. "And I'm not fond of that fact." Dr. Camila Ortega arrived next, bringing a NASA background and a quiet intensity that made junior officers stand straighter without knowing why. She didn't look at the officers first. She looked at the data. "The geometry is hydrodynamic," she said, tapping a frame where the hull's angles could be measured. "This was designed to move through a fluid medium." Rear Admiral Grant Mercer was the military overseer assigned to keep the operation from turning into a headline or a graveyard. He listened to the scientists with the same expression he wore during threat briefings. "Our priority is containment," Mercer said to the room. "No information leaves this platform." "And the second priority?" Ortega asked, her voice polite but edged. Mercer didn't hesitate. "Determining whether Atlas is a national security threat." Monroe sighed like he'd heard this argument 1,000 times. "It's been down there for who knows how long. If it were a threat, wouldn't something have happened by now?" Mercer's answer was immediate. Unknown equals unpredictable, and unpredictable is how people die. Remote exploration continued. High-resolution scans mapped Atlas's outer shell. Attempts to sample the alloy failed. Cutting, tools dulled. Drills skated off as if the surface was rejecting them. Advanced sensors could only penetrate a few feet before data returned blank. "Shielding," Ortega concluded, "not thick armor, something smarter." Then Dr. Lila Chen's reports began arriving and the room shifted again. Dolphins were gathering near the exclusion zone, not wandering in, not curious, but organized. They formed loose perimeters around vessels. They moved in formations that looked almost disciplined. "That's not normal," Chen said, bringing up her recordings. "They aren't feeding. They aren't mating. They aren't playing. They're maintaining a boundary." Mercer watched the footage, then looked at her. "Are you saying they're guarding it?" "I'm saying they're behaving like sentries," Chen replied, "and I've never used that word in a scientific report before." The platform grew tenser with every new detail. And then, far away from the ocean, the story found its human heart. In Portland, Oregon, ocean physicist Nathan Cole was teaching a class on trench magnetism when his phone buzzed with a message from an old friend who now worked in a federal research office. They found something in the western Atlantic basin, something big. "Check your secure email." Nathan's hands went cold as he opened the attachment. Most of the document was redacted, lines of black concealing names and institutional signatures, but the coordinates were left visible, and the coordinates punched straight through his ribcage like a memory, the same region where the Meridian had disappeared 30 years earlier, where Captain Samuel Cole, his father, had vanished with 23 crew members and no wreckage ever found. The official report had blamed a storm. Nathan had never believed it, not fully, not with the strange magnetic readings his father had recorded in his last transmission. Nathan reread the brief note at the bottom of the document. "Your specialization in deep-sea magnetism places you on the short list. If you are interested, say nothing to anyone. Travel details attached." Nathan stared at the screen for a long time, not moving, not breathing properly. 30 years of questions had taught him to expect disappointment. But this felt different. This felt like the ocean finally answering. Nathan closed his laptop, walked back into his classroom, and told his students he had a family emergency. It wasn't a lie, not really, because somewhere beneath a trench that didn't want to be mapped, something impossible was waiting. And for the first time since he was a child, Nathan Cole felt certain of one thing. He was about to find out what took his father. Nathan Cole boarded the military transport less than 24 hours later. He told no one where he was going, not even the colleagues who had watched him obsess over oceanic anomalies for most of his adult life. The order had been explicit. Silence wasn't optional. It was part of the job. During the flight, he reread the redacted briefing again and again, as if staring hard enough might force the blacked-out sections to reveal themselves. They didn't. But the coordinates remained, burned into his thoughts. When the aircraft descended toward the offshore platform, the scale of the operation became impossible to ignore. Warships formed wide defensive rings around a central structure that looked less like a research site and more like a mobile command fortress. Antennas bristled along its edges. Armed personnel moved with the efficient, economical precision of people told very little and trained to question even less. Security was tight enough to make Nathan's skin prickle. After multiple checkpoints and biometric confirmations, he was escorted into a briefing room overlooking a wall of live feeds from the ocean floor. The triangular structure dominated every screen. Rear Admiral Grant Mercer was waiting. "Dr. Cole," Mercer said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Nathan shook it, his eyes never leaving the image. "Is that what I think it is?" "That," Mercer replied, "is why you're here." They didn't waste time. Mercer gestured for the lights to dim, and the briefing began. "We believe Atlas is connected to a series of unexplained disappearances dating back centuries," Mercer said. "Ships, aircraft, entire crews lost without debris or distress signals, including the Meridian." Nathan swallowed. "My father's ship," Mercer nodded once. "The Meridian was investigating magnetic anomalies in this region. Anomalies that match what we're detecting now, only much weaker." "So whatever this thing is," Nathan said slowly, "it was active back then too." "Yes," Mercer said, "and we think it noticed them." Over the next several hours, Nathan was brought fully into the operation. He reviewed sensor data, historical reports, and energy models compiled by teams who had been working without context until now. Patterns began to emerge almost immediately. "This field isn't random," Nathan said during one session, pulling up a visualization of the magnetic fluctuations. "It's pulsing, regular intervals, every 108 minutes. "And during those pulses?" Dr. Ortega asked. Nathan highlighted a narrow band on the display. "The interference weakens, just enough for our instruments to partially penetrate the structure." "A window," Monroe said. "A very brief one," Nathan agreed, "but consistent." Remote drones were sent again during the next pulse. They got clearer readings than before. Internal voids, layered compartments, structural complexity far beyond what any human-made underwater installation could support. But it wasn't enough. "We're at the limit of what remote systems can give us," Monroe said flatly. Mercer already knew where the conversation was heading, and his jaw tightened. "No," he said before anyone could say it out loud. "Absolutely not." "With respect, Admiral," Nathan replied, keeping his voice level, "if we want answers, someone needs to go down there." The room erupted into argument. Military caution clashed with scientific urgency. Risk assessments were thrown across the table. Probability charts were invoked, ignored, reinterpreted. Eventually, a compromise emerged from exhaustion more than agreement. A manned submersible would be prepared, but it would only approach Atlas during a pulse window. No entry, no docking, no heroics. The craft was designated the Harrier. It was reinforced against magnetic distortion, layered with shielding designed specifically around Nathan's models. Every sensor known to science was crammed into its compact frame. The crew selection took minutes. Lieutenant Mara Finch would pilot. calm, precise, with a reputation for bringing fragile machines back from places they weren't meant to go. Dr. Elias Monroe would handle structural analysis. Nathan Cole would lead the scientific mission. As preparations moved forward, Dr. Lila Chen requested additional observation time. "The dolphins are changing behavior again," she said during a briefing. "They're increasing their presence, tightening formations." "Could they be reacting to our preparations?" Ortega asked. Chen nodded. "I believe they are, and I don't think it's hostility." "What then?" Mercer asked. "Anticipation," Chen said quietly. The descent began just before sunrise. The Harrier slipped beneath the surface with barely a ripple, its hull swallowing pressure as the world above faded into darkness. Finch's voice was steady over the internal comms. "Passing 300 feet, all systems nominal." Nathan watched his instruments with a focus that bordered on reverence. Magnetic levels rising within predicted tolerances. At 600 feet, the water outside the viewports darkened into something close to absolute black. The only visible world was the cone of the Harrier's lights. At 800 feet, something changed. The darkness began to glow. A diffuse blue illumination spread through the water, not emanating from a single source, but seeming to exist everywhere at once. "This isn't bioluminescence," Nathan said. "No known organism produces a field like this." Monroe pressed closer to the glass. "It's like we're descending into a lit cavern, except the cavern is the ocean." At 900 feet, Atlas appeared. No image had done it justice. The structure dominated the trench, its triangular mass dwarfing the submersible. As the Harrier entered the pulse window, faint lines of light traced along the hull, igniting patterns that felt deliberate, responsive. Finch exhaled slowly. "She's waking up." Movement flickered at the edge of the lights. Dolphins, dozens of them, emerged from the glowing water, swimming in perfect synchrony. They circled the Harrier, maintaining exact spacing, their bodies cutting through the water like living instruments. "They're escorting us," Finch said. "They've been waiting for this," Monroe replied. Atlas responded. From one of the circular apertures, a smaller triangular craft detached smoothly, gliding toward them with no visible propulsion. It moved with a grace that made human engineering feel clumsy by comparison. "That's not debris," Monroe whispered. "That's a vessel." High-frequency clicks flooded the Harrier's sensors as the dolphins shifted formation. Patterns emerged within the noise: structure, repetition, response. "They're communicating," Nathan said slowly. "With it." The smaller craft emitted a sequence of electromagnetic pulses. The dolphins answered, their clicks mirroring the cadence almost perfectly. "They're translating," Monroe said, awe creeping into his voice. The craft extended a docking mechanism toward the Harrier. Finch stiffened. "Negative, we were not cleared for contact." Nathan stared at the readings, heart hammering. His father's last transmission echoed in his memory, confused, fragmented, mentioning something in the water that shouldn't exist. "This is what he saw," Nathan said quietly. "This is what took the meridian." The docking mechanism locked into place with a soft, mechanical certainty. Internal alarms never sounded. Atmosphere stabilized. Finch's voice was barely above a whisper. "The connection is sealed. Air composition in the connecting tube is breathable." "They prepared for us," Monroe said. "Or they prepared for someone like us." Nathan closed his eyes for a moment. Then he stood. "I'm going across," he said. And in doing so, humanity stepped beyond the edge of observation and into the unknown. The passage between the Harrier and the smaller triangular craft was short, but the sensation of crossing it lingered far longer than the physical distance should have allowed. Nathan felt a subtle shift. not in gravity or pressure, but in awareness, as though the environment itself was acknowledging their presence. The connecting tube sealed behind them without a sound. Inside, the chamber was nothing like a cockpit. There were no seats, no visible controls, no screens in the human sense. The walls curved inward, smooth and seamless, their surface shimmering between solid and translucent states. Faint symbols drifted across them, rearranging slowly as if responding to motion, thought, or both. Monroe moved carefully, every step deliberate. "This isn't built around interfaces," he said quietly. "It's built around interaction." Before Nathan could respond, the floor beneath them vibrated, gentle but unmistakable. Through a translucent panel, Atlas filled their view as the smaller craft maneuvered toward one of the massive apertures along its hull. They were being taken inside. The transition was smooth, almost ceremonial. When the chamber finally settled and the doorway opened, the scale of the space beyond stole Nathan's breath. Atlas's interior was vast, far larger than the exterior geometry should have allowed. The chamber stretched upward and outward, illuminated by the same soft blue glow that permeated the surrounding water. Structures flowed into one another, curves blending with sharp angles in ways that defied human architectural logic. Some surfaces appeared opaque until viewed from a different angle, revealing layered depths beneath. Monroe stood in silence, years of professional detachment stripped away. "This shouldn't exist," he said, not in fear, but in reverence. Along one immense wall, light gathered and reshaped itself into a continuous sequence. Images emerged, Earth young and turbulent, oceans still forming, continents shifting. The timeline advanced steadily, epochs unfolding in silent precision. "They've been watching us," Nathan said, his voice barely audible, "for a very long time." The images changed. Early life, marine ecosystems, then dolphins appeared, first primitive, then increasingly complex. Their brains grew larger, neural patterns branching and deepening across the projection. They guided their evolution, Monroe realized, enhanced cognition, communication, social structure. Another chamber became visible through a translucent partition. Inside were objects arranged with deliberate care, human artifacts, fragments of ships from different eras, aircraft components, navigation instruments preserved rather than discarded. Nathan's eyes locked onto a familiar shape, a nameplate illuminated softly, mounted in a recessed alcove. Meridian Captain Samuel Cole. His legs carried him forward before his thoughts could catch up. "They took it," he whispered. "They took his ship." Monroe placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Or they saved what they could." The floor beneath them pulsed with light. A holographic projection formed at the chamber's center. Earth reappeared. Then the oceans. Beneath the surface, dozens, hundreds of triangular structures materialized, scattered across the planet in deliberate geometric patterns. "They're everywhere," Monroe said, awe and unease mixing in his voice. The projection shifted again. Tall beings appeared, elongated in form, their movements fluid and deliberate. Neither fully aquatic nor terrestrial, they carried an unmistakable intelligence in their posture and gaze. The name surfaced in Nathan's mind without being spoken. "The Oralis," he said. The images showed the Oralis interacting with dolphins across vast spans of time, teaching, shaping, communicating. Then humans appeared, watched from afar, studied, but untouched. "They weren't waiting to conquer," Monroe said slowly. "They were waiting for us to be ready." The projection faded. A new section of the chamber opened. Inside stood a preservation pod. Within it lay a man in a research vessel uniform, older than Nathan remembered, yet untouched by decay or time. His father. "Dad," Nathan breathed, his voice breaking. Monroe approached the pod, examining its interfaces. Life signs are stable, suspended animation, perfect preservation. Nathan's hands trembled. Why keep him? The hologram returned, showing the Meridian's final moments. Systems failing, the ship sinking, the Orales intervening too late to save the crew, but just in time to save one. They couldn't communicate, Monroe interpreted, so they waited, learned, adapted. The final image showed Samuel Cole awake, reunited with his son, standing beside the Orales. They want first contact, Nathan said, understanding settling heavily in his chest. And they want us to help make it happen. As if answering him, the preservation pod hummed softly. Lights shifted, systems engaged. Samuel Cole's eyelids fluttered. 30 years lost to the deep were about to return, and above them the ocean waited, silent and patient, as it had for centuries. Samuel Cole woke slowly, as though rising from a depth far greater than the ocean that had held him for 3 decades. His breathing was steady but shallow, his eyes unfocused at first, struggling to anchor themselves in a reality that no longer matched his memory. Then he saw Nathan. Recognition cut through the haze like a blade. "Nate," Samuel said, his voice rough but unmistakably alive. Nathan stepped forward, the world narrowing to the sound of that single word. 30 years of uncertainty collapsed in on themselves. He gripped the edge of the pod, steadying himself, afraid that if he moved too fast, the moment might shatter. "You're really here," Nathan said, barely trusting his own voice. Samuel managed a faint smile. "Looks like it." Around them, Atlas responded. Lights shifted across its interior surfaces, pathways illuminating in slow, deliberate sequences, as if the structure itself acknowledged that a long-deferred outcome had finally arrived. Monroe stood back, giving them space, though his eyes never stopped absorbing detail. "His vitals are remarkably stable," he said. "Whatever technology they're using, it's generations beyond anything we've imagined." Samuel's gaze drifted to the alien architecture surrounding them. "They kept their word," he murmured. "They said they'd bring me back when the time was right." Nathan turned sharply. "You spoke to them?" Samuel nodded faintly. "Not like this. Not with words. More like impressions, concepts. They didn't understand us then. Not enough." A soft vibration rippled through the chamber. The smaller craft disengaged from its docking position, and the environment subtly shifted as Atlas guided them back toward the exit path. The return journey felt slower, more deliberate, as though allowing time for comprehension rather than urgency. When the craft rose toward the surface, the blue luminescence followed them upward, fading only when sunlight began to filter through the water. Above, on the command platform, tension had reached a breaking point. Rear Admiral Mercer paced the deck, checking his watch for the 5th time in as many minutes. Communications from the Harrier had been intermittent at best, distorted by the same magnetic interference that had plagued every operation near Atlas. "They've been down there too long," Mercer said. "Prep a contingency extraction." Before anyone could respond, an officer at the edge of the platform shouted, "Sir, surface disturbance!" The water around the platform began to glow, not violently, not chaotically. It shimmered. A shape broke through the surface, rising with impossible smoothness. The triangular craft emerged fully into daylight, water cascading from its hull like rain sliding off glass. It hovered briefly, then settled onto the platform with surgical precision. Weapons were raised in reflex. "Hold," Mercer snapped. "No one fires." The craft's surface pulsed softly. A seam appeared, widening into an opening. Nathan stepped out first, eyes adjusting to the brightness. Monroe followed. And then, slowly, carefully, Samuel Cole emerged into the open air for the first time in 30 years. A stunned silence swept across the platform. Captain Samuel Cole, Mercer said at last, his voice measured but strained. Welcome back. Samuel nodded once. Thank you, Admiral, but what comes next matters more than my return. Before questions could erupt, a third figure stepped forward. The being was taller than any human present, its form elongated, posture calm, movements fluid in a way that felt intentional rather than alien. Its skin carried a subtle iridescence, shifting faintly with the light. 6 slender digits extended from one hand as it raised it slowly, a peaceful gesture. Then the voice came, not through the air, but directly into the minds of everyone present. We have waited long enough. You are ready now. The ocean answered. Dolphins surfaced in coordinated waves, dozens becoming hundreds, leaping and circling the platform as if celebrating. Beyond them, the sea itself began to change. From the depths, more triangular vessels rose. 1, then 3, then 7. Across the horizon, the shapes emerged in quiet succession, ancient sentinels revealing themselves at last. Across the globe, sensors lit up. News outlets scrambled. Governments convened emergency sessions as identical reports poured in from every major ocean. There was no invasion, no attack, only revelation. Days later, representatives from across the world gathered at the International Assembly. Nathan and Samuel stood together at the center of the chamber, flanked by Aralis envoys whose presence radiated calm rather than dominance. Earth, they explained, had been a protected world, observed, guided, shielded while its dominant species learned to survive itself. The Aralis were explorers and preservationists, members of a vast interstellar network that monitored developing civilizations. They did not conquer, they waited. They could have intervened at any time, Samuel told the assembly, but they believe growth only matters if it's chosen. A question rose from the floor, sharp and inevitable. And if humanity chooses not to join you? The Aralis response came without hesitation. We will respect your decision, but we will withdraw our protection. The weight of that choice settled over the room like gravity. That night, Nathan found his father standing beneath the stars, gazing upward as unfamiliar constellations seemed suddenly closer. Did you ever lose hope? Nathan asked. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. There were dark years, he admitted, but I knew they were learning, and I knew you wouldn't stop looking. Nathan smiled faintly. I didn't. They're offering us knowledge, Samuel continued. Medicine, technology, history, but what they want in return is partnership, responsibility. Against what? Nathan asked. Samuel met his gaze. Not everything in the universe values preservation. Far below, unseen by human eyes, immense Aralis Guardian constructs continued their silent patrols through Earth's oceans, a watch they had maintained for centuries. As dawn approached, Nathan felt something he hadn't known since childhood. Hope, not just for himself or his reunited family, but for an entire species standing at the edge of a larger universe. Humanity had been invited, and this time the stars were not silent observers. They were waiting.
In the silence beneath the waves, something older learned our names. A heartbeat in the dark below, waiting longer than we know. Steel and light beneath the sea, not a threat eyes a patient mind, guardians of humankind. I search the deep for missing years, answers hiding in my fears. Every signal, every scar pointed back to who you are. You were lost but not alone, kept in light, not turned to stone. Time stood still so we could meet across the dark, across the deep. Voices speak without a sound. Truth arrives, no words around. Not invasion, not a war, just a door we've never saw. They were here before our flame, before we learned to curse and name. Waiting while we learn to stand, waiting for a gentler hand. In the eyes of ocean's kin, I see where we might begin. Old as tides, yet full of grace, bridging every kind of space. Father's voice, I hear it clear. After all these broken years, not a ghost, not memory, standing here in front of me. Stars above and waves below, both have truths we didn't know. We were never left alone, we were watched, not overthrown. They don't come with chains or fire, only questions, only higher, asking softly, not in fear. Are you ready? We are here. All this time we learned to fight. Now we're asked to choose the light, not because we must obey, but because we found our way. Every scar we couldn't heal, every wound we tried to seal, led us here to understand. We decide where now we stand. Ocean sings in ancient tone, songs of worlds we've never known. Echoes rise and then align, yours and theirs and ours in time. If we walk into the stars, we must carry who we are, not as kings, not as gods, just as souls who learn their odds. Hope is quiet, not a shout. Truth is something we grow into. In the dark, a gentle flame, calling us beyond our shame. When the night begins to fade and the choice is finally made,